start, do a little intro, and we'll get going. And when he comes back in, I will flag him down and say, wait.
Yeah, let's get going. It looks like we have 5 people who have tuned in.
Yay,
Hello,
that's
5
awesome.
people. Glad you're
Yeah,
here. Yeah. Do you want to start? Tell us who you are.
sure, I will do that. So my name's Heidi Giesbrecht, and I am I am figuring myself out, which is kind of fun. On Substack, I joined in November of 2025, and I've been kind of figuring out, like, what do I want to do here? What is this all about for me? And really, it has been about it's felt like my personal therapy, honestly. Like it has just been I'm writing and writing and writing and writing, and I find, even like my favorite shows, like I love watching House Hunters International, and I'm like, do I want to watch House Hunters International or do I want to write? I want to write. So I'm showing up here, and I've discovered that, like, I don't have just one thing. I have a lot of things. I am very passionate about learning, and learning being fun. We, as a family, have like an unschooling history that we kind of fell into quite unintentionally, and it became like one of the best things we ever could have done for our family. I'm a
Remind me,
therapist.
you were in some kind of program first, and then you switched to unschooling. Is that right? Not
Yeah,
to
well,
totally derail your entire intro.
yeah, no, we were in a program, believe it or not, the whole way through, but we found a program that was very unschooly in their approach. And so rather than us having to fit the program fit us, which was amazing. So I think I'd mentioned last time Brent Cameron of Self Design, who started up it had a different name when it started here in Vancouver, but it was very much about, I mean, he started it, he was a stay-at-home dad with his own kids and decided the school system was not working for them. And I think a journey similar to yours, like where he was like, there's got to be a better way. And if it's not out there, I'm going to create it. And it's grown to be this amazing program that serves thousands of learners across the province. It is an independent school, but it does pull public funding. Independent schools pull slightly less than a public school. But they do pull funding. And so we found that when my oldest went into grade 4, and it was a beautiful place for us to be. And so, yeah, that's a huge part of our family story. Connected to that is my partner, and all 4 of my kids are autistic and ADHD. And so, even though we never formally went into the public system, in hindsight, I realized we would not have fit well, because as it was, we struggled to fit in so many places, gymnastics classes, just all those different things. So in my paid work, I am a therapist. I am currently playing with ideas on how do you get a benevolent supporter who believes so deeply in what you're doing that they're willing to contribute something that allows you to spend less time doing the stuff you get paid for and more time doing the stuff where you also feel like you have an impact. Because I definitely feel like I have. Yeah, I definitely feel like I have an impact in my counseling work, and it's really intense work. And while I love it, it also leaves a lot less space for other things that I also love. So that's kind of, what I'm figuring out here on Substack is, what do I bring? How do I, like, my handle is encouragement along the journey, and it feels like that comes from a place of strengths that people have identified in me, and also just where I naturally go. Like, when I hear people's stories, I just want to, like, reach out and go, oh wow, you're doing such a great job, this is amazing, like, look what you're doing here. And so so that's
You're the cheerleader.
yeah. And I'm an optimist by nature. I always said with my kids, like, I think I was the mom they needed when it came to believing in them and supporting them and really seeing the best in them. I really had to learn to stretch myself when it came to the advocacy piece, because I do tend to be more of a on the outskirts kind of person rather than a leading the charge person. And I've had to learn how to do more of that because, yeah, when you've got kids who don't quite fit, advocacy is a huge part of it. So, yeah.
Absolutely. It really
Yeah.
is.
So, I mean, I guess that's probably a good intro to start, and I'm sure we'll cover more as we go. So,
Sure we will. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So I'll introduce myself for anyone who's not familiar with me. My name's Katy Purviance. I'm here in Spokane, Washington. I've been a teacher since 2013. I kind of fell into alternative education back in
Mm,
2009. I love teaching. I love kids. I love learning with them. But I don't like school. I don't like school's coercive, compulsive sit down, shut up model of schooling.
yeah.
Um, I just had such a problem with it that I left the system and I started my own school. We are the Spokane Learning Co-op. We've been open for a year and a half now. We're in year two. And we just
Mm,
recently started partnering with a local school district to offer our program 1 day a week to the homeschool kids in that district. And so that's been a fun new thing that we've gotten involved with. And our goal is to become a full-time self-directed education center. And we are going after public funding to do that. Um, we just want to be accessible to the families who would most benefit from what we have to offer. So
mm,
that's it's a very short way of telling a very long story. I got
yeah.
on Substack almost a year ago. I think May or June will be 1 year. And this is what I write about. I write about what real learning looks like, and I talk about school trauma, and I
Mm,
talk about how parents who think there's something wrong with them or something wrong with kids, I help them to see, no, there's not. There's something wrong with the school system that can't accommodate your unique brilliance. Um, a big thing I talk about, which is what we'll talk about today, are those parents who they they're thinking about leaving the school system.
mhm,
They recognize something's wrong, but they're not sure what to do with that feeling that something is
yeah,
wrong, and they feel overwhelmed or scared about what might be next. Um, and a lot of them feel like maybe they're not smart enough
yeah.
to do it on their own, which really begs the question, why would you keep your kids in a system that taught you that you're not smart
Mm.
enough?
That's a great way of looking at it.
The system is supposed to make you smarter. And if
Right.
you went through the whole system and you graduated and you now believe that you're not smart enough
Yeah,
to raise your own kids,
yeah,
ooh, what? Why would you do that?
yeah,
So there's a lot to unpack here,
yeah.
and I'm really excited to get into it with you.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because the thought that comes to mind is, I'll sometimes have parents in my office who are like, "Oh, I'm worried that I'm just a horrible parent." And, and I'm like, "Okay, the fact that you're worried about that already tells me you're not." And so when you
If you
say
weren't worried
like,
about it, then maybe you
right.
are. But
Then, then we have a conversation to have. But
yeah,
right. And so I
yeah,
wonder if with the I'm not smart enough, it's a little bit of that as well. Like if I am worried that I'm not smart enough, then I actually have a lot of wisdom and knowledge and understanding that I'm maybe minimizing and not recognizing the strength and importance of, you know?
it kind of calls back I think one of the objections parents have to the idea of pulling their kids out and approaching it from a different point of view, like an unschooling point of view, which we're both fans of,
Yeah.
is that they worry about there being learning gaps. Something we talked about in
Mhm.
our last conversation, right?
We did.
And,
Yeah.
a lot, and I loved it. Um, which points to the fact that they themselves graduated with a learning gap,
Yeah.
the gap of being able to educate their own child.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think, we identified last time that learning gaps are so normal that no matter how you were educated, you likely had a learning gap. And
Yeah, and it's impossible to not have a learning gap. It's
Right.
absurd to think that you're gonna learn everything you need to know to live
Yeah.
well by the time you're 18 and that you're never gonna learn anything else after. That's
Right.
absurd.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
does anyone really believe that?
I think we tend to have like really high expectations of ourselves as humans.
Mhm.
And, even the fact that we think we should be able to get through 12 years of school, 13, maybe 14, depending on where you are,
Yeah.
and know everything. Like, it's, yeah, it's kind of superhuman. So,
And even
yeah,
the stuff that you do, quote unquote, learn or that you
yeah,
have been exposed to and have been tested on and passed a
yeah,
test, if it's not relevant, your brain gets rid of it. Like that's our way our
yeah,
brains work. Like in order for your brain to hold on to some information, it has to be relevant to your
yeah,
life, useful in some way that you can perceive. And if
yeah,
it's not, your brain like lets go of it so that it can have the capacity, the bandwidth to hold on to something that is relevant and useful.
right.
Like,
Well,
I think it's so common for people to be like, "Yeah, I regurgitated it on the test, and the next day I
yeah,
had no idea what it was."
yeah. Well, I
Why
was
did
I was
you know?
thinking as you were talking, I'm like, I think our definition of learning is wrong.
How would you define learning?
That's a good question. How do I define learning? I think I would define learning as being open to the thought, not just being open to the thought, but actually holding quite dearly to the thought that I don't know it all. And there are lots of different ways that I can take in information. And it's not about knowing it all or knowing it perfectly, but it's about being willing to engage with it and take input from others and take some of the things that we are exposed to and critically evaluate them and figure out like, I think even like when someone gives me feedback, I need to be open to that feedback. I need to be willing to take it in. Just because it's feedback though, it doesn't make it true.
Yeah,
And so
very
understanding
open.
that that feedback comes from someone else's perspective. And
Yeah,
so I'm not going to write it off. I'm absolutely 100% going to listen to it. And then I need to do some processing around which part of this is theirs and which part of this is mine. And
yeah,
sometimes it's a little bit of both. And so to me, learning is having the wisdom to be in that process.
yeah. Yeah, you made a good point, like, yeah, everyone's feedback comes from their own lens, their own
Mhm.
pool of experience, and it might not have anything to do with you, and it might not be useful, it might not be reliable,
Yeah.
it might not be valid for
Yeah.
your situation.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm thinking about how I would define learning because in grad school, I had a professor who would use the word learnings like a plural noun, like what were your
Mhm.
learnings, right?
Mhm.
Um, Another way to put it might be like you hear in presentations, people will say the takeaway I want you to get from this
Mm.
away with. And then I also think of learning as the process, as the verb.
Mhm.
Um, I think when you're ready to learn something and when you're interested in it and when it's relevant to your life, then you're open and the
Yeah.
learning is able to come in. You're able to, it changes your brain, right? Like if you
Yeah.
have, I think of it as like a hook in your brain. If you have a hook ready to go, then you have something that can attach to that hook. But if you don't have that hook yet, it doesn't matter. You're not going to learn it. There's nothing to grab onto with this new piece of
Mhm.
information or this new experience.
Yeah. Well,
So,
and I think of learning too as a lifelong process. It's not just something that we do and then we're done.
yeah,
And, we talk about being a lifelong learner, and really that is about being willing to take in information and influence and allow it to shape and guide us as we go. And I just released yesterday evening a podcast that my colleague interviewed me and my partner. So he's autistic, I'm not. And so we thought, oh, it'd be really cool to have a conversation about the differences in relationship and how we've navigated that.
yeah,
And he, towards the end, he said, well, you know what fail stands for? And I was like, no. And he's like, first attempt in learning. And I thought, oh, I love that because it completely reframes it from the negative connotations that we have around failure to failure isn't failure. It's just your first attempt in learning. And learning is this ongoing process. Like we learn things, sometimes we have to unlearn them, and then once we've unlearned them, we have to relearn them in a different way. And again, that's not a stationary, we're done, I've got it, I'm 100% figured out. But as we gain new information, as we gain exposure to things that we didn't have exposure to, we need to have self-compassion, of course, because sometimes guilt can come into that, like, I should have known this. Well, no, I couldn't have known this, but now I've got new information. So how do I incorporate that? How do I
And you're
continue
and
learning?
as you live your life, you're going to keep getting more information. Your understanding of any topic is going to continue to evolve over your life. Like name any topic, and what did you know about it when you were 14 versus 24 versus
Right,
now, right? Like it's totally different. Like if you
right,
could go back in time and talk to your teenage self about any topic, you might be
right.
shocked at your original learnings
Yeah,
about that topic. And it just that's what wisdom is. It's the
yeah.
accretion of lived experience.
Well, I think there's something really freeing about seeing learning as an ongoing journey because as you say that, I think, oh, again, I think of clients who like beat themselves up for decisions they made when they were much younger. And it's like, oh, but you didn't know any differently. Like you were doing the best you could at that point with what you knew, with who you were, with all the information you had. And now you've gained more information. And so we really need to be able to look back on those younger versions with compassion and understanding, and rather than judgment and condemnation, which again comes from that failure as a negative lens, right? Rather than failing as attempts in learning.
And where did we learn that failure was bad?
I wonder.
Starts with an S and
Is it
ends
good
with
enough for an A?
yeah, yeah. How do I get an A on this? That's all that
Yeah,
matters.
totally. Yeah.
So yeah, shall we talk about
Yeah.
the decision?
Let's.
The decision.
Yeah. Lead us
I
in.
talk to a lot of parents in my work. Parents reach out to me all the time. Sometimes, one moment.
Hmm.
Parents reach out to me all the time, not only because they're interested in the Spokane Learning Co-op, but because they're dealing with whatever they're dealing with
Hmm.
their child in the school. I hear from people who live in other states where they're clearly not going to move to Spokane to join my little school, but they are reaching out for help with their kids. And what I found, and you've probably heard this too, it seems like there's like three groups of
Mm.
parents, three different stages of this journey. The first group of people, their kids are in school and something's wrong. They can feel something is wrong. Like they had
Yeah.
a certain expectation of what it would be like for their child in school. They had a certain narrative in their head, and it's just not working out that way.
Mm.
And there's all kinds of reasons why, like maybe the school's underfunded, or maybe the teachers, burnt out or dealing with their own moral injury, or maybe there's maybe the kid and the environment are not a good fit, and so they keep clashing. Maybe the parents are experiencing a lot of phone calls home and emails home. Maybe they're being pushed by the school to go get a diagnosis for their child so their child can be medicated so that the child can fit the shape of the school rather than the other way around.
Yeah.
So these are some of the struggles that parents are going through in that first
Yeah.
stage. And the second group of people, they're a little bit further along. They know they want to make a change. They've identified that school is a problem, and
Yeah.
that who their child is and what school is, they just don't mesh. It's like oil and water. They might be at a place where they're like, oh, maybe school's good for some kids, but school's not good for my kid. My kid's really suffering in a way that's unnecessary. And I don't like the effect that school is having on my kids. So they know that something needs to change, but they are absolutely terrified of
Mm.
making a
Mhm.
change. They don't want to see their kid continue to suffer, but the idea of actually pulling their kid out or looking at alternative programs or homeschooling, that feels like too much. It's like they're on the edge of that diving board and they know they have to dive, but it's too scary and they're just frozen in that fear.
Yeah.
And then the third group of parents are a little bit further along. They're like, school is a problem. I have to pull my kid out. They've made
Yeah.
that decision, they're going to pull their kid out. But then they think about what comes next. What do you do on that next Monday?
Yeah.
It feels so overwhelming, especially when they're dealing with the fear.
Yeah.
Um, they believe that they're not smart enough to do this.
Mhm.
Maybe there's too many options and it's
Yeah.
overwhelming, or maybe in their area there's not enough options, and
Yeah.
they think I can't do it all on my own. Some parents are dealing with something very difficult where their spouse just doesn't see it the way that they see it.
Yeah.
Right? Their spouse is all in on keeping their kids in public school, and they don't really see how much the kid is suffering, and they don't see the emotional labor burden that their partner is carrying with all the phone calls home and all the notes home and the
Ugh,
after school
yes.
restraint collapse and the tears and the difficult mornings. Like the other spouse isn't, as privy to that ongoing trauma. And so they just don't support the decision. And so now the parent, in addition to dealing with the school and trying to comfort their child, is also trying to convince somebody who is just not witnessing the same things that they're witnessing.
Yeah.
Um, so those are the three groups. That's kind of the timeline.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and there's, I think there are just a number of things come to mind. Like, I think the parents' emotions and the parents' insecurities and the parents' processing of their own presence in this process is such a huge part of it. And it's so natural to have massive fears. Like, I remember making this decision, and I use this phrase, and it genuinely was what I was thinking at the time. And it's going to sound really dramatic, but it was, I am going to ruin my kids for life.
I hear that so many times.
Right? And it's like such a huge, heavy weight because as a parent, you're wanting to do the best for your kids. And the fear that I am going to do something so wrong that I'm going to mess them up forever. And like, I don't want to do that. And I think the other part of it too is sometimes we just don't have models for it. Like when I stepped into kind of a more structured program, the reason I did it was because at this Christmas banquet, I ended up sitting with a woman who had her kids in a program that
Yeah.
was like a distance learning program. And it sounded really interesting. And then it showed up in a new local newspaper that there was a new program starting up, and I went to check it out. I don't think I would have done that if I hadn't had that conversation with her. And then when it came to switching to more of an unschooling path, I had met a mom who she was just so dynamic, and her kids were amazing, and they were unschoolers, like just, yeah, so involved in the unschooling community. And it showed me like there's a different way, and look at what these kids are doing. And hearing stories from other moms who were quite a bit further along the journey, where they were kids being accepted to UBC as
Yeah.
unschoolers, and I was like, what, that's possible.
Yeah.
And so I think that was why I was so excited about our conversation, because I think, again, if somebody hears this and maybe they've already been thinking about it and it helps them kind of make that decision, maybe this is like, wow, this is like, I mean, this is so out of this world. I've never heard of this before. It might open up the thought that, oh, there could be a different way. And so I just think these conversations are hugely important for exactly that reason.
It's so valuable. It's so valuable to meet and know somebody who's already did it. And that's true for
Yeah.
anything. That's true for anything that feels too scary, just meeting somebody else who's already done it,
Yes. Yeah.
right? Because then you see, oh, it can be done and everyone's surviving, and actually their kids seem like a lot happier than my
Yeah.
kids who are still in the system, right? It creates that cognitive dissonance. This thing
Yeah.
I'm so afraid of might actually be on the other, like if I can get to the other side of that fear,
Yeah.
things are going to be a lot better for me and my kids.
Yeah. Well, and I'll just put a little thought in here. So I did a series of podcasts, and the one last weekend that I released was with three of my four kids.
Okay.
And the reason I wanted to do it was because I my kids just amaze me. Like, they are amazing human beings. They are so wise. And I was like, guys, I really like, I don't want to just talk about my experience. I want you guys to share. Like, you have so much wisdom to share about being autistic. And so the podcast, like, it was fun doing it when we did it. When I went back to edit it, oh my gosh, I was laughing. Like, it was so engaging. And I came away from it going, oh my gosh, these kids are amazing. And you know what? It's because they were allowed to thrive. And so if anyone is like, I don't know, like, is this going to work for my kids? You are welcome to go listen to that podcast. It's on my Substack. I think it's called Flipping the Script. And if you listen to it, you're going to hear my three kids who have never gone to school other than if they wanted to, like some of them in grade 11 and 12 took like a theater class or a Japanese class or something like that. So you'll hear from kids who did not go through the traditional school system. And I think a lot of times for people, there's encouragement in that, because I know there are so many fears about, if I don't put them through the traditional school system, will they not thrive? Will they not flourish? Will they not learn? Yeah.
And I think the biggest irony is that leaving your kids in a system that you know is hurting them
Mm-hmm.
is also is making that fear come true, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and
It's making it so that they have something to recover from. They're trying to set up in their
yeah,
adult life and trying to be
yeah,
a successful adult, and they might be overcoming, or not even aware of it, but people-pleasing tendencies.
yeah,
Kids tend to pick up people-pleasing tendencies in school because their status with their peers and their status with their teacher depends on their ability to keep their inner self quiet, to
yes. Make
subdue
themselves
themselves
small. Mm-hmm.
for the social safety of adhering to the teacher's rules,
Yeah,
because everyone learns that if you're that outcast, if you're that scapegoat in the classroom, you don't have any friends, the
yeah,
teacher's not on your side. Like that can take a lifetime to heal from that.
yeah.
Um, for the kids who can't or won't or don't follow the script of the school,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
they grow up believing that they're stupid. They grow up believing that they're not any good, that they're not good
Yeah,
enough. And that can also take a lifetime to unpack and heal from if they ever do.
absolutely. Yeah.
So,
Well,
and
I
what I
think,
think is really important for parents to know is like, if you take your kids out and you feel it was a mistake, you
yes.
can go back in.
Right.
Like, right? It's not like a forever decision, right?
Yeah.
Like, and people do that. People, like, year to year, it's different. Like, they might go with one program one year and then try a private school another year and do a
Yeah.
hybrid micro school another year.
Yeah.
And no matter what, your kid is learning something and you're learning something.
Yeah. Well, ironically, that's how I got myself over that hurdle, because, like, just to register my kids in this distance learning program was agony, because I could not make a decision. And I finally had this little aha moment where I went, really? Like, this one tiny little decision is going to ruin them for life? Like, what if I put them in and I don't like it? What then? And it was
Take them
like,
out,
I could take
try
them out.
something else.
And so for the first little while, like, September, we started this program, and my mantra was just until December, just until December. Like, once
Okay.
we get to December, if it's not working, January, they can go back to school. And, we got to November and October, November, and I was like, they're going to school. And by the end of December, I was like, no, we could finish out the year. And
Oh, I'm
so
so
again,
interested.
yeah.
Tell me.
So
What
again,
happened? What happened between those first few months and December when you were like, "No, we're good." Like, what changed for you? What changed for your kids?
well, I think we felt incredibly lonely, because we'd had this beautiful preschool kindergarten community that was all about joy of learning. It was such an amazing program. And we had friends. And then, grade one rolled around and everyone was in school full time. And so all of our connections were gone, all of our community was gone. And we felt really, really alone. And even when we did get together with people, they were on a totally different wavelength. Like they did not get what we were doing at all. And so it took some time for us to start building community. And honestly, I would say probably it took a good 3 years to really develop a good, solid community. But I tend to be a bit of a, if I can't find what I'm looking for, I create it. And so when I was like, okay, we need support, we would just, whenever there were people around who were homeschoolers, we would try to get to know them. And the unfortunate thing for us was that a lot of times we would connect with someone, and then next thing I knew, they were going back to the school system. And I was like, oh, so I think it was, sorry, I'm still recovering from my cold. I think it was when my youngest would have been 4 years old. So my oldest would have been 9. So it would have been like grade 2. I started asking a different question. So when I would meet homeschoolers, I would say, oh, so like, do you think your kids will ever go back to school? And if they said, oh, yeah, probably, I was like, oh, okay, nice. And that was it. I would just keep it kind of surface level. But if and one of my really close friends, who's still one of my dear, dear friends, um, she, when I said, so do you think your daughter will ever go to school? She was like, oh no, she'll never go to school. And I was like, oh, hi, I'm Heidi.
You're
And
my new
so
best friend. Yeah.
exactly. You don't know it yet, but and so we slowly started developing this little community around us, and we developed kind of a core group, and we called ourselves Friday Friends because every Friday we would meet up at Starbucks, and the kids would have their tables, and they would do whatever they wanted to do, and the moms would sit at our table, and we would have coffee and visit, and so it started to shift once we built some connections, because it can feel like a really lonely journey until you realize that there are so many like-minded people. You just have to find them.
So many.
Yeah.
And it's getting easier and easier to find. There's more and more
Yes.
every
Yes.
year. There's so many Facebook groups
Yes.
for, I hope, every area. There's
Yeah.
there's just so many options now that didn't exist
Yeah.
10 years ago, 5 years
Yeah.
ago. I
Yeah.
think COVID really helped
Yeah. Well, and the
the
homeschooling
blossoming of all these
community,
alternatives.
yeah, the homeschooling community here in our area, I'm in BC, Canada. Of course, I didn't say that when we started. Um, I think has been growing for a long time. And so for decades already, there has been basically in every, so I mean, Vancouver is like one big mega city of cities. So all the
Right.
cities just like literally a street divides, one city from the next.
That's how
And
Los Angeles is, where I'm from.
yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, very
Big city.
similar.
Yes.
So big mega city. And so each different community has their not back to school picnic at the beginning of September, that first week of September, usually. And so that was a way to connect with people as well, because you go to this and you meet people who also are not going to school. But honestly, I found that first part of the fall really, really isolating and lonely. And I would say that was one of the biggest challenges initially. There were other challenges that came
So what
along
did
the
you
way.
do? What
Well,
what did you do with that loneliness? How did you handle it?
like I said, we tried to. I got onto a lot of local Facebook groups,
Yeah.
and I mean, back in those days, we also still had Yahoo chat groups, like where everything went out by
Right.
email. So I got on some of
Yeah.
those, and anytime somebody said, "Hey, I'm thinking of organizing a field trip to go meet the llamas. Who wants to come?" I'm like, "Me, we'll come." And so we just really put ourselves out there. Whenever there was a homeschool opportunity that came across my desk, we would participate, whether through the program that we were with or kind of with the broader homeschooling community. Because I think field trips definitely happen in many different ways. And then eventually, I actually started. I became a bit of an organizer because with 4 kids, you've got a really nice solid group. And so I would say, this looks like a really interesting opportunity. We should see how many we need to make it happen. And a lot of times it would be like 5 or 6. And I'm like, okay, 1 or 2 more kids. I'm sure I can find somebody. And so
Yeah.
I would organize a field trip and then I would put it out there and people would join us. And so we started getting to know people. So it was a bit of just prioritizing that building community piece that really, really helped and shifted things for us.
Yeah. One thing I wonder about, like, in your work as a therapist and you're talking to parents, do
Yeah.
you do you have do you have parents who are dealing with this decision
Oh, yeah.
themselves and they're at different stages? What are some of the things that you've heard? Like we talked about, like the three different groups, like those
Hmm.
who know something's wrong, but they don't really know what yet, and to those who are like, yeah, school is wrong, but I'm terrified of actually doing anything, or the third group where they're like, okay, we're leaving school, but I
Hmm.
don't know what comes next. What does that look
Hmm.
like for you in your practice when you talk to parents in any of those stages along the journey?
Yeah. Well, I mean, for starters, I always have to be really upfront with them and say, "Hey, so just so you know, my family has had a very untraditional learning experience. So, you know, none of this is what you have to do, but this is the perspective that I come from."
Yeah,
So, I would say it's a little different for each group. So, you know, the parents who are like, "Something is wrong," I think often we sit with it to try to figure out what are some of the things that are wrong, and I might gently mention that there are other ways of doing school. Um,
yeah,
and even just to like broaden it out and say, you know, I mean, we've got different options here. We have learning centers, learning education centers that basically run the school curriculum, but they do it in a very different sort of way. It's much more communal and
okay.
there's a lot more support. So kids who are struggling in school often find that they do better at learning education centers.
Mm,
So, you know, that's kind of a like we'll talk about that as a possibility. You know, I'll talk about so here the graduation certificate is called the Dogwood. And
oh,
you can graduate with the Dogwood, which is like 15 courses through, you know, grade 10, 11, 12. Or you can do the adult Dogwood, which is 5 specific courses. Basically, I think 3 or 4 of them have to be done after you turn 18.
okay.
So it's kind of the adult upgrading version, but you can do it as a high schooler who's not quite finished when you wanted to be. And then there's the evergreen, which is just, hey, I was in school for 12 years and now I'm leaving school. And so sometimes I'll just kind of talk with parents about, you know, maybe the this thing that we've been sold that you have to go through it and you have to, oh, we lost Katie. Okay, she'll be back, I'm sure. Um, I'm still waiting for my husband to come figure out my camera because it did not work. So my apologies on that. And hopefully Katie can get back in. Um, oh, here we go. I can invite her. I'll send the invite again and it will invite her to join. Yeah, so I think I was talking about just kind of helping parents see that there are different options. And when it comes to um, graduating from high school, oh, there you are, you're back.
Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you. Yeah. Oh, and there's
I,
your
I,
camera.
I think my internet dropped. I'm back.
Oh, I assumed that was what it was. Yeah. So no worries. We got it figured out. So, yeah. So, in terms of like different ways of going through school, and I always say to parents, like, in all of life, we have hoops to jump through. And
Yeah,
sometimes we choose which hoops matter to us right now. And if we don't jump through the hoop now, we can always jump through a different hoop later. And,
yeah,
you know, I use the example of like learning to drive. Like some kids, you know, here we can go get our learners at 16. Some kids are like the day of their 16th birthday, they are in there getting their learners. Other
yeah,
kids are just not ready for it. And they maybe go get their learners when they're 25. And it's
right.
like, yeah, you
And
make
that's
that
fine.
decision. And, you know, maybe the jobs between the age of 16 and 25 that require you to have a license, you end up not going for those jobs. Or if there is a job you really want, that might be incentive to go get your license. And
Right.
so,
Yeah.
you know, talking about like school is much the same thing. You can jump through the hoop and get your graduation certificate, but there's also lots of different ways. Like you can take a year or two off and apply to university as a mature student. You don't
Mhm.
need a high school certificate for that.
Yeah.
And in
You
fact,
can
if you do
travel, you can
that,
go volunteer, there's so
right?
many things you can do. You can start a business. There's so many things. It
Yeah,
doesn't need to be like everyone doesn't need to go through the exact
right.
same box step.
And if
process.
you apply as a mature student, your application actually, from what I've been told, goes on a separate pile. So you have like all the high school kids that get compared to each other, and you've got the mature learners who get compared to each other when it comes to admission. And so, just I think when parents are like something's wrong, but and maybe they're starting to move into the okay, well, I can see that there might be a different way, but now I'm terrified. Just to kind of ease some of those worries, like, hey, like there's lots of ways of getting there. And then I think also addressing some of those emotional personal concerns of like, I'm not smart enough, I don't know if I can do this. And again, hey, there's lots of different ways of doing this. You might be, and I talk about like the homeschooling spectrum. You've got, on the one end, you've got people who do school at home. They run it like a bell schedule, and you've got like your assignments and things that you have to do. And on the, oh no, I hope we don't lose you again. Are you there, Katie? Yes, you're there. Okay. I thought we lost you. I was like, no. Anyways, I'll just keep going. On the other end of the spectrum is the complete, like all of life is learning, and let's just do life and live and grow as we do so. And so letting parents know, like, you might find yourself in different places on that spectrum throughout your journey, and that's okay. And that can sometimes make it a little less scary as well.
I think it's important for parents to remember, like, if there's something that they don't feel confident in being able to teach their child,
Mm,
they're able to learn along with their child, and it's almost better that way, right?
yeah,
Coming at it from a point of view of somebody who's trying to learn it,
yeah,
right? Because if you're coming at it from a learner yourself, you're going to figure out what kind of process works best for me as a learner and what kind of process works best for my child as a learner,
right.
rather than thinking, oh, this one way that I learned it is the way to learn it. And you're going to try to teach your kid that way to learn it, but that might not work for your kid, right? But
Yeah,
if you can come in with that enthusiasm and excitement of like, I don't know, let's find
yeah,
out.
yeah.
That
Well, and
opens the whole world to you. It's almost better
yeah,
to not know everything because you, and that's another thing. Like however long you went to school, whether it was like 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, there might be more information about that subject now than you had
right,
originally learned, right? Maybe
right.
there's been some developments in understanding that topic, and you get to learn it afresh. You get to learn
Yeah,
what the latest developments in that field of study are.
yeah. Well, and I think, there's like two societal norms here in North America that I think really actually hamper us.
Mm,
And the first one that comes to mind is this incredibly individualistic mindset that we have. Like, I have to do it alone. I can't depend on people.
I
Um,
can't ask for help
I
because
can't
then I'm
ask for
weak.
help. Right. And, when you were saying, like, what if you don't know it? You can learn alongside. And my thought was, you could also find someone else who's really great at it, who's willing to work with your kid and teach your kid. Right. One of this is like one of my favorite schooling moments with one of my kids. And we were shopping. So we were out, we had gone to one of our local drugstores here, London Drugs. It's kind of a bit of like it's a drugstore, but it has everything else in it too. So
Yeah, so like in
we
the States, like a Walgreens or a CVS.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so we had dropped the others off at preschool. So it was just me and my oldest, and it was our first year of homeschooling. And we needed to go use the washroom. And so we're standing by the washroom door and it's locked. And whoever's in there was in there for a really long time. And we're like, oh my goodness, like, okay, but there's nowhere else to go. We just need to wait. And so
Yeah.
we're standing there waiting, and an electrician comes in and he's working on the light box. And it's one of those like long light tubes, right? Like the oh gosh, the lights that
A
I hate.
fluorescent, a
Fluorescents,
fluorescent
thank you.
light.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's a fluorescent light. And of course, my oldest always had questions about everything. And it's like, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, well, I'm working on this light. I need to change out this light bulb. Oh, well, why are you doing that? And so this whole conversation started. And next thing I know, I'm just kind of like standing back and listening. And he's like, yeah, but you know what? You never want to drop one of these. And my kid's like, why not? And he goes, well, because you know what happens when you drop one of these? No,
No,
what
what?
happens? Well, it shatters. And he said, and you know what? It is a mess to clean up. And he starts talking about what's inside the light bulb and how it, you know, how it creates light with electricity and how electricity works. And my kid is like totally engaged and asking questions. And I went home and I was like, oh my goodness, like we did weekly observation for learnings. And so this was like, you know, I had to like write my couple of things that I had observed that week. And this became one of them because I was like, oh my goodness, we just had a science lesson in London drugs. Like, right? From somebody
Science is
who knows,
everywhere.
yeah, and from someone who knows what they're talking about. And so, you know, a lot of times our learning happened in these really organic ways that didn't depend on me knowing everything.
Oh my god.
Um, so I think that's the first one. And the second one that I think gets in the way is around the authority question.
Mhm.
Because I know for myself, like I was raised in a fairly traditional conservative home, and there are rules to be followed, and there are people who know what they're talking about, and there is a hierarchy, and you listen to the people who know what they're talking about. You listen to the people who are smarter than you, are, you know, above you. So like you listen to your teachers. And I think a lot of parents, when they start thinking something is wrong, I want to pull my kids, the voices around them are saying, oh, you can't do that. Do you know how bad, how are they going to be socialized? Right. That lovely question.
Which is
And
a crazy question. Yeah.
it is, because the socialization they get at school is probably not what you want them to actually learn. Right.
They're
So
not allowed to socialize in school.
yeah. And so,
Whoops.
I always try to get parents to touch in on, you know, your kid and you know your family. And if something isn't working for you, trust your instincts. Like, other people don't get to make that decision for you. You get to make the decision that's best. And people might not always agree with you, and that's okay. And it's, you know, harder when you're still trying to figure out if you're doing the right thing, but it does get easier as you feel more confident in it.
And you know that voice, that authority figure voice that a lot of people have,
Yeah.
uh, who put that voice there? Like, a lot of people
Mm.
are still carrying their own school trauma well into their
Mhm.
30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond
Yeah.
of, you know, of being afraid of getting in trouble or
Yeah.
having a lot of life experience of getting in trouble for that authority
Yeah.
figure and feeling that pain and that shame of getting in
Yeah.
trouble in front of their peers. And so when they hear that voice, it's crazy because in education, I don't want to say in school, but when you're learning, when
Yeah.
you're educating yourself or learning something new, the idea is that it's supposed to expand your thinking, right?
Yeah.
But the way that school works, it constricts your thinking, not into what's
Yeah.
possible, but what's not going to get me in trouble.
Yeah.
It's a very
Yeah.
constrictive way to view the world. And so when you hear that little authority figure voice in your head that's shutting you down, maybe you need to shut that voice up. Maybe that voice no longer
Yeah.
has a place in your
Right.
life. Maybe it's no longer valid.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not something to listen to anymore.
Yeah. And I think that's where I find community is so important, like finding people that you can have those conversations with. Like for a long time, my mom and dad were both trained as teachers. And my mom was not someone that I could have these conversations with for a really long time because she didn't get it. And she was constantly worried about the kids and, well, how do you know? Do they get tests? You know, and it was really, it
How do
was
you know
when,
you know them because they're your kids? That's how you know.
yeah. Well,
Wow.
and we did a road trip together. It was fairly early on, and the kids were allowed to bring whatever they wanted. And we ended up, we had two cars because there were like the six of us and my mom and my aunt.
Yeah.
And so at one point, my mom and I ended up in a car with my middle daughter. And my mom looked back at one point, and my daughter was like, they all had little lap desks. We had like supplied them with everything they could possibly need for happy travel in the car. And she had hauled out like some of her workbooks, and she's working through her workbooks. And my mom's like, oh, did you tell her to do schoolwork? And I said, oh, is that what she's doing? No. They're just allowed to do whatever they want. Oh, and I think my mom started to see like, oh, these kids are like they're engaging with stuff and they're doing it because they want to, not because they have to. And
Mhm.
so I think I like her understanding of it kind of shifted over time, which was really good. But I really needed other voices at the beginning because, yeah, people that weren't understanding it often made me feel like I was second guessing myself.
Ah,
Um,
yeah. No, I hear that. I have some very dear friends who are teachers or administrators, and they
yeah,
don't get it. They don't get it, and
yeah,
it's frustrating on one level, but it's also an
yeah,
opportunity to help them see another point of view.
yeah,
I think all teachers and administrators can agree with the fact that there are some kids who really struggle in school, right?
yeah,
That's just a fact, right?
absolutely. Yeah,
And so once you can get someone to that point, that opens up the conversation. Like,
yeah,
oh, I wonder if there's another way to work with this child such
yeah,
that it's not a struggle for them anymore,
yeah,
right? It's almost like hand holding them step by step through the thought process.
yeah,
Do they get to until they get to the point where they realize, oh, there's not a problem with the child, there's a
yeah,
problem with the environment. And there
yeah,
are other environments where this child no longer has problems.
yeah, yeah. Well, and I think, I was thinking along the lines of like finding ways to connect with a different way of thinking. I know you've got some resources on your Substack that have like different books and stuff. Cause I know for us, there were some books that we read that were really helpful. And the funny thing is, my husband read them because I was already sold. Like, I'm game, but he was still a little hesitant. And so he's a reader. And so started like suggesting some books like, hey, why don't you read? So I'm trying to remember what some of the
Yeah, I was
books
gonna ask
were.
what books, because this is a very common problem where, like, typically the mom, not always, but typically
Yeah,
the mom is the one who sees the problems, who's
yeah,
getting the emails, who's getting the phone calls, who's going to the meetings, who's, in tears.
yeah,
The dad typically, is gone at work plus a commute and just, they barely get to see their own kids, so they don't
yeah,
see everything else that their wife is dealing with or their partner is
yeah,
dealing with. And it becomes a question of, like, how do I get them to see? Like,
yeah.
it's so obvious to me, right? So what books did you
Well, I know
recommend?
one
And what was
one
that
of
experience
them, yeah, one of them was Dumbing Us Down by John Taylor Gatto.
like? Yep.
And I think that one was really significant. I think the Unschooling Handbook was another one. Um, I feel like Free to Learn might have been one as well. Just kind of flipping through titles here to see like which were the ones. Um, oh, there was another one. I honestly can't remember the title of it now, but you probably have some suggestions as well. Um, oh, and of course Brent Cameron's book. Oh gosh, I'm gonna have to look it up because, as you can tell, I'm not great with names or titles or remembering those details. I can tell you other stuff,
Well,
but
well, there's some of that I'd add to the list. Blake Bowles,
mm,
um, he's got a book called "Why Are You Still Sending Your Kids to School?"
okay,
And it's like, the other books that we've mentioned, I've read these too, and some of these are, thicker. They require a
yep,
little bit more of a time commitment, and Blake Bowles' book is more like, "Er," and
nice,
it's just no fluff, just straight to the point. Like, here are the arguments against, the major objections. Like, what about socialization? What about gaps? All of it. What about college? Right? He gets right to the point, and he breaks it down, and he
yeah,
blows those arguments apart. He also has a great YouTube channel where he just gets to the point and he's like, look, this is how it is. And what you think you're getting when you send your kids to school is not what you're getting.
mm,
And if you take them
mm-hmm,
out of school and you put them in an alternative, here is what's very likely that they actually will receive. And it's much more aligned with what it is that you're hoping you get when you send your
yeah,
kids to school. So
yeah,
I think, like, that book and his videos online, like he has a book on, or a video on making education consensual, right?
mm,
But
mm-hmm,
all of his videos and his books, they're just to the point. Like, if you're a
yeah,
busy parent and you're trying to make a point to your spouse to help them to get it, I would
yeah.
recommend Blake Bowles' work.
Awesome. Yeah, so Brent Cameron's book is Self-Design: Nurturing Genius Through Natural Learning.
Love it.
Yeah.
That's the only one on this list I haven't read yet, so I'll read that one.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and it's the program here in BC that we were part of for many, many years was
Right.
self-design. Yeah. And it's interesting when you said consensual learning. We with our kids, um, before we even had our kids, we talked about like, what do we want to be like as parents? How do we want to do this thing? And because of our own experiences in life and school, we both had some things that were like really, really important to us. And so one of the things we talked about was we don't want to just get like proper behavior from them. We really want their hearts. We want a connection with them. And so once we started like looking at the school system, we're like, this doesn't feel congruent with how we're parenting, because it feels like it's very compliance based and it's all about behaviors, and that's not how we're parenting. And so it impacted our school, but it also, we really believed strongly that just because we're the parents, it doesn't make us better or above our kids. Like, we are in this together. We talked about like Team Giesbrecht, we've got this, we're all doing this together. And so what it actually translated into was letting the kids really lead us in terms of where they wanted to go with learning. And when it came to them being diagnosed as autistic and ADHD, we actually started taking that into how we access services and how we access supports, where we often said like we actually let them self-direct the supports that we access. So instead of saying you have to go to speech therapy and you have to go to OT, we would sit down kind of August of each year and we would talk about the things that we had done the year before, and we would check in with them to say like, how are you finding that? Do you think you'd like to keep going? And if there was something like speech therapy they did not love, it wasn't their favorite. And so, you know, we did talk about that one, and there was a point where we kept going even though they didn't love it. But it was in conversation of saying, you know what, I know it's not fun, but sometimes we have to do things that help us. And would you be willing to do one more year? And they were like, okay. And then it was like, after that year, if you don't want to continue, we will drop it. And so they were like, okay. And I think we decreased the frequency. So again, it was this co-decision making. It wasn't just this is what's happening and you got to do it. Why are you not doing it? But
I
yeah.
think that's such an important balance for families to find, because like I know some families who are very rigid and authoritarian, where what their
Mm.
kids want simply doesn't matter. Um, and in some ways it makes sense, right? Because the adult has more life experience and maybe they see the value of something that their kids don't see. But like you said, it should be a conversation. The parent can name out, can say, you know, what the value is and demonstrate to the kid why it's important. And on the other side of the coin, I know families who are very permissive, who,
Mm.
you know, their kid kind of runs the family.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's an obstacle I hear, or an objection I hear when parents are
Mhm.
considering unschooling. They hear phrases like child led, and they have this idea that that means that the child is now in charge of the family. Right.
No,
I'm
that's
like,
so not good.
it's,
No.
right, right. Like, no.
Yeah.
What is that called in politics? Kakistocracy, where those least able to lead are those leading.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Anyway,
Um,
no, it's like you said, it's a real partnership, right?
yes.
Real
Yes.
partnership. Like, you as the adult can explain why you think going to certain appointments is valuable,
Yeah.
well, how it will help them in the short term and the long term. Um, it's also an opportunity to get over, or to help them understand that just because you're uncomfortable with something doesn't mean it's bad,
Mhm.
right? And
And
it's
I
also an opportunity to hear from the kids from their point of view. Like, maybe
yeah.
there's something, maybe they don't like the way the office smells, and that's why
Yeah.
they don't want to go, right? Maybe it has nothing to do with the actual service that's being provided, but you
Yeah.
won't know that until you open up that conversation and you create a space where it's safe for them to tell you
Yeah.
what the real
And I
problem.
and I think like conversation really is the key, because it cannot be this is how we're going to do it, and I'm going to tell you why this is good for you. I think that whole uh, like helping the kid see what it is and knowing very clearly in your own mind which part of this is a choice and which part is not. Don't make it sound like a choice when it isn't a choice.
Yeah,
And
like, you want to go on Tuesdays or Thursdays? That's not a real
yeah,
choice.
Yeah, but like to really be clear about, if it's, hey, you know what, we do have to keep doing this, and I'm going to let you know why, and we'll talk about it. But maybe, is there something that we could do to make this easier? What do you need? How can I help you with that? Right? There's some choice in that, and so that might be where you identify. Well, I don't like the way the office smells. Oh, okay. I wonder what we could do about that. But it is really that willingness to like take input from your child, not to
Right.
see yourself as like having to do everything. And when you said like some parents see unschooling as like, I hear abdication, like abdicating being a parent. And it's like, no, 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 no. Like unschooling, you are more involved than ever because it's all about the
Yeah.
relationship. And it's all about, like, I saw my role as not being a teacher and teaching them things. My role was being a facilitator. And
Yeah.
so I would try to find like my kids have seen so much of the world, not anywhere that we would fly to because with four it just wasn't affordable, but our local area, they've been to so many museums, so many interesting places. We would do driving trips, and we did this massive road trip through the US where they had friends who were in various parts of the US who kept saying, oh my gosh, you're hitting all of my bucket list places. And at one point, we said to them, you actually have seen more of the United States than a lot of Americans have.
I
Um,
believe it.
and they were like, what? And so, yeah, my job was I'm going to find cool places for us to go. And then I'm going to take us. And then I'm just going to let my kids' curiosity lead the way because I know them. And as soon as they get into a situation and they're seeing things they haven't seen, they start asking questions. And I go, whew, go for it. Like park rangers loved our family
I
because we were
bet.
always the family at the front with all the good questions. And they did not come from me, they came from my kids.
I love it. I love it. Getting
What
back to the idea of how these decisions are a conversation, I think it's the same thing if you're deciding whether or not to pull your kids from school.
Mm,
Like
mhm.
like a lot of parents will be like, "How was school today?" "Fine." And that's the end of the
Yeah,
conversation, right?
yeah,
If the answer is fine, then the answer is not fine.
yeah, or it
Like,
sucked.
yeah, yeah, like
Yeah,
you gotta figure out a way to dig deep and find out what their experience is really like and
yeah,
find because parents see what they see, but they
yeah,
don't see what it's like to be their child at that
yeah,
school, taking those classes with those teachers and with those peers, right?
yeah,
That's like a whole side of the equation that most parents are not privy to, right?
yeah,
You've gotta create and maintain a very strong relationship with your child so that you can really
yeah,
so they feel safe enough to have those conversations with you about
yeah.
bullying
Well,
or Mr. So and so doesn't like me or whatever it is. If you don't have that open relationship,
yeah,
then you're trying to make a decision, should I stay or should I go? You're trying to make that decision based on just what you observe.
yeah. Well, and I think too, like Ross Green says, all behavior is communication, right?
Yes.
And so I think for some kids, you see it in behavior. Like the kid that loved kindergarten is suddenly refusing to go to school, or
Uh-huh,
you're
change. Yeah.
late every morning because they
Uh-huh.
don't want to put their shoes on, or they have a meltdown in the morning, right? Like,
Or they have a stomach ache every single
oh,
morning, and every time you
yes.
let them stay home, stomach ache suddenly goes away.
Exactly. Yeah. And so paying attention to some of the behaviors rather than, again, trying to correct the behavior, figuring out what's actually going on. And
What's behind that?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
There's so many childhood behaviors, like the stomach ache every
yep.
morning or the refusing to get out of bed or the meltdowns after school that
Oh,
or
yes.
when they're teenagers and they're getting surly and they have an attitude with their parents, like,
Yeah,
all of these things that have become categorized as simply normal child behavior, they're
yeah,
not. Those are all reactions
yeah,
to going into spending their day at a place where they feel dehumanized or disrespected in some way.
yeah.
Right,
That
and
that
if they had the language to communicate that they were being dehumanized or disrespected in some way, that would help the parents to understand it, but when children don't have that language of being able
yeah,
to communicate in an adult way so the parents understand, they're going to resort to saying they have a stomach ache. They're going to
yeah,
resort to an attitude because that's the only way they have to communicate that something is wrong.
Right. Well, and that whole like meltdowns after school or like struggling so much. I
Yeah.
think that's one of those parents often, especially if the feedback they're getting from school is, "Oh, they were a perfect angel." And then you're like, well, how come are they like a perfect angel when they're at school? And then they come home and they're a terror. And I spend the entire evening mopping them up off the floor. And recognizing like if that is the pattern that you're seeing, that school is not seeing any issue at all. And yet when they come home, they're not doing well, that might just be that you have a kid that is very, very capable at pushing themselves through the day and meeting expectations at school, but it is taking so much out of them that by the time they get home, they have nothing left.
That is
And
exactly it. That's exactly it. That's what, yeah, after school restraint collapse. They are spending all their energy just trying to hold it together all day long so that they don't get shamed or in trouble.
yeah,
And they can't keep it in all day. And so when they finally get
yeah,
home to their safe space, it all comes out. It's no different than an adult who has a bad day at work every day and comes home and drinks too much.
right,
Because it's like
right.
they need to like finally let it out. And it's just not safe
Yeah,
to do that
yeah,
at school.
yeah. Well, and something you said earlier twigged this thought, and I can't let go. So I have to go back to it. And I don't even know what you said that twigged it. I think you were talking about rigidity.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times, and this is not across the board, I have some educator friends who are lovely and definitely flexible and all about learning and engaging kids.
Yeah.
But I also know that there are a lot of educators who are not, who are very rigid, and they have this is the way it's going to be done. And they might refuse to work with a child's IEP because it inconveniences them to accommodate
Or
the
they don't agree
child,
with it or yeah.
or they don't agree with it. Yeah. And I just I follow autism discussion page on Facebook, and one of the things he said, this is like years ago, but it's just stuck with me, was the more rigid the child, the more flexible the adult needs to be. And I
Mm,
think we often get that wrong. We think the more rigid the child, the more rigid we have to become to show that we're stronger. And
it's about
right.
control. It's about trying to control the child.
Yeah. And
Like,
so when he said, like, the more rigid the child, the more flexible the adult needs to be, I was like, oh, that makes total sense. And again, that feels very countercultural. Like, that's not how we were raised, that's not how we were taught to parent. And
yeah,
so I feel like a lot of this is really inviting us to revisit our own understanding of what it means to be a parent, and if we're going to step into kind of homeschooling, unschooling, what it means to be our kids educator. It doesn't have to be a top down approach. Like, what if it is, hey, we're going to go through life learning, and our best years happened once we were able to kind of let go of some of the expectations that we thought were there. And I remember at one point just thinking, and this is when we made our switch to unschooling, because I was like, I feel like I'm spending so much time just trying to get them to do their sit down work, and it feels pointless. And this is not what I wanted. The reason I did this was because I wanted really good relationships with my kids as a family. And we, at that point, went completely like self-directed, child-led, and we started just doing like cool field trips where all of us would go. And if my husband could get some time off work, sometimes he would come. And then eventually we started inviting our Friday friends, and so we would always do like at least a couple, like 2 to 3 times a month, we would often do field trips in addition to our Friday hangouts. And
very
um,
nice.
it was beautiful because relationships started to grow and learning just happened so organically and so beautifully.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Well, I think we've come to an hour.
Yes, and a bit.
Talked about a lot of things, a lot of really good nuggets here in our
Yeah.
conversation today. This has been great. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
I'm so sorry I didn't get my camera working. That was a little frustrating, but next
Oh,
time.
next time. It's
Yeah.
okay.
He told me once I had started the live stream that I did it in the wrong order, that I was supposed to open my camera first, and I was like, "Oh, I'm not going to
Oh,
stop it now." So,
right.
but oh well, next time. Live and
Next
learn.
time. Here we are,
Here
lifelong
we are.
learners.
Absolutely, right? There's always something to learn.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, this has been awesome. Thank you so much, Katie.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And
All
thank
right.
you to everybody who joined. It was great to see you guys all here. And if anyone has questions, I know both of us will be posting this after the fact. Definitely feel free to ask. We had hoped to get to questions, but we were too busy talking. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. If anyone has any questions, my Substack is called The Joy of Learning. It's really easy to send me a message. I'd
yeah,
love to hear from you.
awesome. Have a wonderful Saturday. Well, Saturday here where I am, to everyone. All right. Thanks so
All
much.
right.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.